The council chamber went silent the moment I refused to sign. My name is Daniel Ashford, and I was standing in front of 11 alien delegates who had just ordered the evacuation of a human colony they called a resource conflict zone. I called it home. My sister lived there. 300,000 people lived there. And the paper in front of me asked me to sign away their land in exchange for peace that never actually arrived. I did not sign. I set the pen down, looked at the delegate leader, a tall being named Vorkessen, with silver eyes that never blinked, and I said one sentence that changed everything. We are done being patient. Nobody in that room understood what those 5 words meant yet. I barely understood it myself, but something inside me had finally cracked, and once it cracked, it did not close again. For 60 years, humanity had been the newest and smallest voice in a galaxy full of older, stronger civilizations. We joined their alliance eager and hopeful, believing that peace was something you earned through patience. So we apologized when we were blamed for things we did not do. We gave up trade routes when we were told they were needed elsewhere. We watched our colonies get quietly reassigned to other species under the polite word, administration. We swallowed insult after insult because our leaders feared what would happen if we pushed back against civilizations that had fleets 10 times the size of ours. I was a young officer during the Corvin incident, the first time humanity truly understood what our silence was costing us. A human science vessel was boarded without warning, its crew questioned for 18 hours, and released without apology. My captain at the time, a steady man named Peter Lang, said something I never forgot. He said, "One day, they are going to push somebody who has nothing left to lose. And on that day, they will finally understand who we are." He was right. That day came for me, on a cold morning above a colony called Haven Ridge, when I received a message that the settlement had been reclassified overnight, and its people were being relocated by force, without their consent, without warning, because a mining consortium wanted the land beneath their homes. My sister, Ellen, was one of those people. I remember standing on the bridge of my ship, an Alliance-registered vessel called the Meridian, staring at the screen as reports came in. Families were being moved out of their homes at gunpoint by enforcement drones belonging to a species called the Threll, an old and proud civilization that had grown used to nobody saying no to them. I called my superior, Admiral Laura Whitfield, and asked for permission to intervene. She paused for a long moment, and then she said something that still gives me chills. Permission granted. And Daniel, do not stop at intervention. Show them what we have been holding back. I did not fully understand what she meant until I saw the fleet. Within 6 hours, 40 human ships arrived in the space above Haven Ridge. Not to threaten, not to attack. We simply arrived, calm and unified, forming a barrier between the colony and the Threll enforcement vessels. No warning shots, no aggressive maneuvers, just presence, just refusal. The Threll commander, a broad figure named Doran Vec, contacted me personally, his voice sharp with irritation. "You are interfering with a lawful reclassification." I answered him plainly. There is nothing lawful about taking a home from people who never agreed to leave it. He laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who has never been told no in his entire life. "Your alliance status depends on cooperation, Captain Ashford. Step aside, or face consequences." I looked at the screen, at the colony below us, at the families still standing outside their homes, refusing to move, refusing to give up the only life they had ever known, and I made the same choice thousands of humans across the galaxy were making, that very same day, without knowing it yet. I said no. Not loudly, not with anger, just quietly, clearly, and completely. We are not stepping aside, and we are not asking permission anymore. What happened next has been studied by historians ever since, because it was not a single battle. It was a wave. Every human vessel across every Allied region received the same order that day, sent not by one government, but by a quiet agreement among human commanders, who had all reached their limit at the exact same time. Ships stopped answering calls demanding favors. Diplomats stopped apologizing for territory disputes that were never our fault. Trade routes that had been borrowed by other species for years were suddenly reclaimed, calmly and without negotiation. It was not chaos, it was discipline. The kind of discipline that comes from people who have spent decades practicing patience and finally decided patience had a limit. Above Haven Ridge, Doran Vex enforcement ships to push through our formation. My ship held position, engines steady, shields raised but weapons silent. I gave one instruction to my crew, a young pilot named Nathan Cole and a tactical officer named Clara Bennett. We hold the line. We do not fire first. We do not move. For 11 long minutes, nothing happened except silence and tension thick enough to choke on. Then Doran Vex's flagship powered down its aggressive systems, and his voice came through again, quieter this time. You would risk conflict with the Threll over 300,000 humans. We would risk everything over one, I said. You just happened to threaten 300,000. There was a long pause, and then, for the first time in 60 years, a Threll commander backed down without a single shot being fired. The colony stayed, my sister stayed, and word of what happened above Haven Ridge spread through the galaxy faster than any official announcement ever could. 3 days later, I stood again in that same council chamber, facing Vorkesson and the other delegates. This time, the room felt different. This time, they were the ones choosing their words carefully. Vorkesson spoke first, his voice measured, almost cautious. Your species has been unusually assertive this week. We have been patient for 60 years, I said. You mistook that patience for weakness. It was never weakness, it was restraint, and restraint runs out. One of the older delegates, a quiet observer species called the Ilvain, spoke up for the first time in any session I had attended. We warned the council years ago, a species that endures insult after insult without breaking is not weak. It is simply waiting to see how far the insult will go. Vorkesson did not respond to that. He simply looked at the papers in front of him, the same papers I had refused to sign 3 days earlier, and he quietly set them aside. The reclassification of Haven Ridge is withdrawn, he said, effective immediately. It was not an apology, not exactly, but it was the first time in 60 years that a demand made against humanity was reversed instead of enforced. I did not celebrate that day. Victory, when it finally comes after decades of swallowed pride, does not feel like triumph. It feels like exhaustion and grief for all the years we spent apologizing for simply existing. That evening I called Ellen. She was standing outside her home, the same home she almost lost, watching the sunset over Haven Ridge with her 2 children beside her. You saved us, she said. No, I told her. We stopped letting them push us. That's all it ever took. She was quiet for a moment, and then she asked the question I imagine an entire species was asking that night. Why did it take so long? I thought about Peter Lang, about the science vessel that was boarded without apology, about every quiet insult we absorbed because we believed peace was worth any price. And I gave her the only honest answer I had, because we wanted to believe patience was the same thing as peace. It took losing almost everything to learn that peace only works when both sides respect it. In the months that followed, the galaxy did not fall into war, as many had feared it would. Instead, something quieter and more permanent happened. Species that had spent decades testing human limits suddenly discovered that those limits were real, and that humanity, once pushed too far, did not retreat. We simply stopped moving. Admiral Whitfield summarized it best during a public address that was broadcast across every human colony. She said that humanity had never wanted power over anyone. We had only ever wanted the right to exist without apology. And on the day above Haven Ridge, We finally understood that the right to exist has to be defended, not requested. I still think about that council chamber sometimes, about the moment I set down the pen and refused to sign. I think about how simple the choice actually was, once it finally arrived. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet decision that enough was enough. The galaxy had spent 60 years pushing humanity, testing how far we would bend before we broke. What they never expected was that we would not break at all. We would simply stop bending. And once we stopped, we never went back to the way things were before. Because patience, it turns out, was never our weakness. It was only ever a choice. And on the day we chose differently, the entire galaxy learned exactly who we were.